This morning I was having coffee with my partner, holding his hand, sitting next to each other in bed, having coffee the way we do. And I noticed something, which I notice often. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to act like it was magical that I noticed it this morning. I noticed quite often with him that there is still that feeling that we've had from the beginning of, I can't wait to be with him when we're apart. And I don't want to leave him when we're together. And I love just sitting next to him and holding his hand in bed in the morning so much that we have our coffee maker in the bedroom with us. You know that feeling, like that small lift in the chest, like a constant pull towards him. Some people call it chemistry. Some people say chemistry is bad. It's that thing that all of us chase when love is new. But underneath it now, there's something even better that those early days didn't have. And I didn't even know what they felt like or what it felt like. It's security and peace on top of that need and desire to just be close and that feeling of peace sitting next to each other. We are entering our third year starting tomorrow. Tomorrow will be our third anniversary. And when I met him, he very honestly told me he never believed that he could be monogamous and that he hadn't been before. And so that was something that we really had to work through. And with him and everyone before him, I never really believed I could feel safe. And here we are. We're still reaching for each other, and we're still desiring one another. We are monogamous. I am safe. It took some pretty turbulent times to get here, but now we're reaching each other and we're resting like on this solid ground and this solid foundation. At least it feels that way right now. And so as I was driving to work later, after we went our separate ways, I was thinking about this question that I want to spend this episode talking about. What is the honeymoon phase actually made of? And I want to touch on why it goes away, how it can stay, and all of those things. But I also don't want to miss talking and tackling some of the subjects that are out in the social media world right now about chemistry and whether it's good or whether it's bad. And even I think I've posted things about, looking for safety and not chemistry. And I feel in my heart that you can have both, but not everyone does. And I want to tackle that a little bit too. So we're going to talk about something I feel like almost everyone has felt. And there are, of course, psychologists and therapists who've really examined it. But I'm not sure a lot of that is mainstream. I want to talk about that early stretch of a relationship when you feel like that exciting time. I mean, look at my light up. That exciting time when the whole world tilts toward one person, the honeymoon phase. I only had a name for it over the last few years since when I was in school, learning about relationships and learning about my own relationship as I traveled through the honeymoon phase. And I remember Googling, how long does the honeymoon phase last? How do you know if you're still in the honeymoon phase or if you've left it? Because all I knew was things felt so incredible with Frank that I didn't want to change. I wanted it to stay that way forever. And in past relationships, I know We've said things like, we're never going to change. When we get married, we're not going to change. And then you do. So with him, it felt so good and so different that I was like, I don't want this to change. I want it to be like this forever. He used to say that I reminded him of the character, the female character in The Notebook, because she always ran to him. And that's how it felt. That's how it has always felt with Frank. Like, I can't wait to get there. As I'm recording this episode, we are going to meet up tonight later, and I can't wait to finish here so that I can get this edited and get to him. And then tomorrow is our anniversary, so we'll be golfing and having steak and doing some fun things together. And so it just lights me up to still think about being with him and spending time with him. So I want to look at what the research says, how long the honeymoon phase usually lasts, why it happens, why we need it, why none of us would probably ever be together with another person if we didn't have it. We may not even be procreating if we didn't have it, and why it fades. We're going to talk about what's really underneath that early, like, intensity. And it might not be what you think, might not be what you've heard. We're going to look at the harder versions of this, like what the honeymoon phase looks like in relationships that are coercive or harmful. And then we're going to get to the question that I care about the most: whether you can keep the good parts of it alive on purpose for the long haul, what that looks like and how we do it. Because to me, that's probably the most important in where I'm at right now in my relationship. But I know that there are others out there who are in different places and may even be curious if you can get it back, if you've lost it. When we talk about the honeymoon phase, we usually talk about it as a single thing. Like a bright window that opens when love is new, and then we think it's going to quietly close, maybe a year or two into the relationship. So we treat it kind of like one substance, like a fuel that just burns out. But I don't think it's one thing. I think the early intensity is at least two things intertwined or braided together so tightly that we can't quite tell them apart. So we have to dissect it a little bit and pull things apart to take a look. The first strand is love, like real love. And it's delight, it's curiosity, it's the genuine pleasure of discovering another human being and letting yourself fall, which can happen on different time spans for different people. Science tells us that women are more likely to fall first and much more quickly. Women can truly fall in love in 5 or 6 weeks, whereas men, to really fall, oftentimes take much longer. Not always. It can be reversed, or it can be, people can be on the same path, but men will usually take sometimes 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, a year, which I think is confusing for women. I think it does cause some issues in relationships, especially when women want that exclusivity and they want to be told I love you back. And the man can't do that, or won't, or he does and he's not telling the truth. But I think the second thing is less commonly understood or known. It's very quiet, maybe even a little more anxious. And it's this wish to keep someone, to impress them, to secure a place that doesn't yet feel secure. So this is what has us showing up our best, right? This is what my boyfriend would call Ocean Prime Frank. He shows up to dazzle. He still tries to dazzle me, but he doesn't have to be on and dazzling all the time anymore. in the beginning, when it was just dates, every date was a dazzle. The first date was such a dazzle. There was a dazzle and astrology and all of these things combined that it literally did take my breath away. And some might say, "Oh, Leslie, that's very dangerous. That's chemistry," right? But the other thing that was impressive or that I had never experienced before was that Frank's body, when he would hug me, would calm me. And I had never had that before. That could be chemistry too, but it was shocking, just shocking that another human being's body could calm my nervous system without doing anything else. Very cool. But he did the dazzle, right? Like we all do the dazzle. The men do the dazzle, the women do the dazzle. Ours looks different than theirs. Each individual person might look different, but when you think about it, like when you don't yet know someone and you don't know whether they're going to stay, your body stays like a little bit braced, a little on alert, and you become like very attuned to them, like you're monitoring their whole being to see if you can pick up on any little changes or any little signs of what they're thinking, whether they're going to run, whether they're going to stay. You might read your text messages from them twice. I read them multiple times. But most importantly, you're going to offer your most appealing self. You're going to dress to impress and just show up. And this is the time period where the door's going to be held for you. You might get flowers, all of those things. Someone might find out you something you really like and they go get it for you. But here's the thing that I keep coming back to. Some of what we call passion in those first months is real. So some people never stop dazzling. Some of the behaviors that they are doing to impress you are also things that they're always going to do. I have never opened a door for myself in 3 years when Frank is in my presence. And if I did, he would give me a side eye. I like that. Not everyone does. When we walk down the street, we are constantly switching sides because he's always making sure I'm on the side furthest from the traffic. In the beginning, I probably thought, oh, this is impressive. He's trying to impress me. But in reality, like we are 3 years in and those are real things that he does for me. And there are many, many, many other things that he still does. And there's a lot of passion that's still there. Some of it even more intense than it was. And so what I have found is that the things that are still there, they're even better now that we're safe and secure because we've removed that feeling of worry and anxiousness and is this real or not? And now I can see very clearly what's real and what's not real, and he can too. And so that's my point here. Like some of those honeymoon phase behaviors that we had in the beginning to impress one another are just who we are. And that's cool. Because I would say for us, the most impressive things, the things that turn us on the most, the things that make us best friends, the things we love about each other, were very much alive in those first months, in that first year, and are still very much alive. And he will say, like, you never stop showing up the way I need you to. And he used to say, I'm just waiting for you to change. I'm waiting for you to start nagging or complaining or giving digs, but we don't do that now. I'm going to be doing an episode on this Saturday. It'll be in the YouTube episodes about the difference between a boyfriend and a husband. And I think it's a significant thing to point out here because Frank is not my husband and we don't have children together. And that certainly makes a big difference here. But before we get into all of that, let's bring in some research because I could ramble all day about us. And hopefully this is resonating with some of you and maybe helping some of you who are out there in the dating world think about the traits that you want in someone and watching how they shift or if they shift when you're in those early dating time periods. Like if someone comes to dinner, holds the door for you, dresses really nice for the first 5 dates, and then date 6, 7, 8, 9, they just want to have dates on the couch and they're wearing their basketball shorts, barely brushing their teeth. Like, think about the things that are important to you. If it's important to you that you get all dressed up and you go out sometimes, ask yourself, is this something that's going to change in a way that makes the honeymoon phase go away and something that I really love and enjoy goes away? But we're going to look at some research that I think will be clarifying because a lot of people search for this, right? They look for the Google search. How long does the honeymoon phase last? I am guilty. I did that with Frank. It's like, please don't make this go away. Some people look for why does it happen? A lot of people look for why does it go away? So let's talk about the why. In early romantic love, your brain is genuinely running very hot. Dopamine and norepinephrine surge, your serotonin actually dips. And that combination is part of why new love can feel so obsessive, like you're ruminating about this person, you're obsessing over them. The racing thoughts, trouble concentrating, the way your mind keeps returning to that one person. It's intoxicating. And it's a beautiful state. When I met Frank, he said, "Oh, I love being in love." And now I know what he means. He loved that dopamine hit and that feeling of euphoria. It's also an activated, like slightly destabilizing time period, right? By design. But it doesn't last. That destabilized, activated period doesn't last. So across roughly the first year or two, that acute chemistry begins to settle. And as it settles, a different system comes forward, a calmer one, which for some people can feel threatening if that's not what they're used to. But it's built on more than chemistry and more like the chemistry of attachment and bonding than the chemistry of pursuit. So we know one of the reasons women become attached so much earlier is because we get more of that bonding hormone very early on, whereas men don't start getting the bonding hormone until they truly are in love and are starting to form that attachment with the person. So our current chemistry in this process is different for men versus women or males versus females. So when people ask what comes after the honeymoon phase, this is the honest answer. It isn't that love ends. It's that love changes your system. So your system starts feeling safe and your neurochemicals start adjusting. So you go from the fireworks of like constantly wanting them to a more steadier, warm feeling of belonging. However, as I said before, I do think that for some people, fireworks, maybe they don't go off as frequently, but they're still there. And there's still a very magical feeling when those people come together. But most of us, the problem that happens is most of us were never told that this second phase is coming and what to do when we start feeling the first phase fading away. So when the fireworks start to quiet, we start to panic. And I can attest that I've gone through that in this relationship as well, where as things started quieting and becoming more steady, I was like, is this boring? Also, I think some of it started quieting for him a little bit more than me. I still, like, I literally can't wait to leave this office and go home and see him. But he is an introvert, so he needs a lot of alone time. And once he got really comfortable sharing with me, like, I need my time and my space, it felt like it was really safe for him to say that. And I was still like running to get to his place or to home if he was there to see him. And so I went through this period of being a little bit nervous and scared, like, what's going on? Is it over? Am I done? I even got a little bit avoidant myself because it felt so threatening. So when the early intensity drops, most people read it as the love is leaving, right? I don't feel the same way about them anymore. But if we go back to those two strands that we were talking about before, if some of that early intensity was anxiety, the not yet safe part of you was working so hard to hold on, then what's leaving isn't only the love. What's leaving is the fear of the love going. And so here's like the cruel little kind of trick of what happens a lot of times at the end of what we call the honeymoon phase. We're so used to fear dressed up as desire that when the fear finally goes quiet, then its absence can feel like emptiness or this is over. So we can grieve the loss of the spark the way it was in the beginning, when actually what was left or what has left the relationship is the threat. So the relationship is now secure, but the threat felt like desire. Hopefully that's landing and making sense. Esther Perel talks about this and says that it's really hard because so much of desire is coming from like chemistry, and that feeling of longing and wanting someone comes from desire, and desire comes from danger and threat. And yet we want safety and security. And then when we get it, we have to figure out how to keep the desire, even though it's not safe, which is a challenge. So if no one's ever named this for you, the calm of a secure relationship can feel like something is wrong. And I feel like that's probably where I was when I started Googling the honeymoon phase. Like, how long is it? And what does it feel like when it's ending? A few years back. But what the message that I want you to hear is that, in fact, something is finally right when you feel that calm. So breathe. Just breathe. Now, I want to take a careful turn here because a fair question is whether any of this looks different in a relationship that is coercive, abusive, has a narcissistic person or codependence, the ones people often describe as toxic or narcissistic. And it does look different, but maybe not different in the way that you would expect. You might assume that the honeymoon phase in those relationships is thinner, less real. It's often the opposite, which makes it that much difficult. The early intensity is frequently more extreme, not less. A very fast, sweeping idealization. Sometimes we call it love bombing, where the warmth arrives almost immediately and overwhelmingly, and the relationship feels like fate. So in the moment, it can look like the most intoxicating honeymoon phase you've ever experienced. Just extreme, which is exactly what makes it so disorienting when we look back on it, and hard to leave because it's like a fantasy. It is a fantasy. So the difference isn't how it feels, the difference is more like structural. In a relationship that's moving on the path towards security, the early intensity starts to settle, and the fear that lies underneath starts to quiet into trust. In a coercive dynamic, the fear never resolves. It never goes away. The warmth doesn't grow up into steadiness. It becomes reward. And the reward at the end of the cycle is what just keeps repeating. So there's usually tension, rupture, and then a return to tenderness or remorse that pulls the other person back in. So, in fact, those relationships start off even more intense. And the honeymoon phase, for many people, they would describe it as the most intense honeymoon phase. And it's fast, like very fast. It comes on very quickly, usually. So the honeymoon keeps coming back, but only after there is harm, if that makes sense. So there's some kind of major rupture, and then there's repair, and then the honeymoon reoccurs. And there's a name for what that does to the nervous system. It's called intermittent reinforcement. Unpredictable warmth, sometimes closeness, sometimes pain, forms a far like stickier bond than the steady kindness that you usually get in a relationship. So people call that the trauma bond, because the body stays hooked to this on off or mean nice or whatever the opposite kind of polar opposite dynamic is. It's always waiting. It's hoping that the good version, that version from the beginning of the honeymoon phase, always comes back. And it does. What often happens is that the honeymoon phase reoccurs after the rupture. And then over time, the periods of the honeymoon phase reoccurring get shorter and shorter, and the ruptures come more frequently. And the honeymoon phase may become even less intense because the trauma bond and the addiction to it is just requiring any repair in any kind of honeymoon phase type activity or treatment. And so it gets to the point where them just being nice to you is enough, and it feels amazing. So there's a wanting to keep and a wanting to impress. So in healthy relationships, that's a passing, like early thing that doesn't keep going. In this one, it becomes like the whole climate of on and off, on and off. So I want to say this plainly and kindly. If the calm in your relationship is always a reprieve after repair and it's never a foundation, it might be that type of relationship. If the closeness only ever comes back after a wound. So those are the types of questions I get often about the honeymoon phase when people say, well, I feel like we're always in the honeymoon phase, but there also are a lot of ruptures, and we're going to look a little bit more closely. So this is not the honeymoon phase maturing. This is more of what we would call a cycle. And I think it deserves to be taken seriously. And if you realize that's the situation that you're in, you're going to need a lot of real solid support from family, friends, therapy, everything. All right. There are other videos about trauma bonds and other resources on my website about trauma bonds if that's something that you feel like you need to read about. But that's not what this video is completely about. So we're going to go back to relationships that are safe. Because even there, even in the good ones, there is a real kind of paradox waiting. And nobody really names it better than Esther Perel. And here's the tension. Love wants closeness, familiarity, the comfort of being completely known. But desire wants something almost the opposite of that. Desire wants space and mystery, the charge of another person who stays a little out of reach. So, how can you have both of those things with the same person? So, the more that two people merge, the more that they collapse into one another in a shared life with no edges, the more that unknown quietly disappears. We know almost everything. So the very thing that fed the wanting goes away. So this leads to kind of an uncomfortable conclusion that none of us, including myself, want to admit or talk about because it seems like a death sentence for our relationship or for the parts of our relationship that we want to live on. The security itself is what dims the desire. And I mean, if that's true, then it sounds like a trap, right? You have to choose between safety and the spark, comfort or passion. That's not fair or fun. But I don't believe that's the real choice. And Esther Perel talks about ways you can avoid falling into that trap. And I want to share kind of where I've landed on this. I feel like security and mystery are not opposites, that they need each other. I like that much better. Because a truly secure bond is the thing that gives you the freedom to stay a separate person, which is what both people want. To keep your own interests, your own inner life, your own edges. So without the constant fear that being separate will cost you the relationship. So anxious love reaches for fusion because fusion feels like proof. Secure love can tolerate distance, and distance is where desire breathes, right? So let me make that really concrete for you because my partner and I actually do live this now. But we've gone through a lot of learning to get there. We haven't always lived this. So we don't share a home, which helps. We live about a door apart and we see each other every single day. And I'll tell you, I still feel that anticipation, as I've said before, that lift, like right before I get to his door. There's always a coming toward him. There's always a person on the other side of the door who's fully, completely his own person. So the closeness is daily, but the merger never quite finishes for us. And I think the gap between himself and myself, that little bit of like unfinished space between us, it's not a failure of intimacy at all. It's that room. That's where we keep our desire, in that space. And it's working for us. And I think when we merge too much and we don't give each other space as couples and we just fully merge everything in our lives, that's when we lose the desire. There's no gap. There's no distance between each of us. So let's bring all of this together with the question that we started with. Can you keep the good of the honeymoon phase alive? I believe you can. I'm a Pisces dreamer, but I think I'm right. But I don't think it's happening the way that the internet tells you. It's not about chasing the old chemical highs. It's definitely not about manufacturing drama so you can feel something again. It's gentler than that. And honestly, it's harder. The first piece is the regulation work, doing enough of your own healing that the relationship stops being driven by fear, facing all the things about relationships that are scary for you, and possibly the trauma that caused that fear, so that when calm arrives, you can recognize it for what it actually is and understand that it's not a threat. So safety isn't absence. And the second piece is protecting what keeps each of you whole. What makes you separate? What makes you interesting humans that are not the same person? This means time apart. It means your own pursuits, your own friendships, and the ongoing willingness to look at your partner and remember that you've not finished discovering them and that there are many more adventures that you can have together, experimenting you can do with one another, countless things that you can do to keep the desire there. I think the third piece is the simplest one, but the deepest. You have to keep reaching for the other person and turning towards the other person, as the Gottmans would say, on purpose. Because in the beginning, we reach because we're afraid to lose them. But later, we reach because we choose to, because we know we're not going to lose them. But we keep choosing them. And chosen reaching, it turns out, is the more durable kind of reaching. So when someone reaches you for you because they don't want to lose you, it's very different than when they reach for you because they have for sure chosen you. And I love that. Nothing feels better than being chosen, I think. So I'll be honest, before we close, it's taken a lot of work and a lot of time to get us to the point of our morning coffees, even though we've loved our morning coffee for quite a while, most of our relationship. Having the peace we have now during the morning coffee took work, a lot of work, and trust and understanding and getting through that peaceful period when the honeymoon phase was ending and having me say, what is happening? And we've had to have conversations together and with our therapist saying the relationship and our personal lives are actively evolving and changing. And that's okay. It's okay. We still want to be here. But sometimes those changes are happening so slowly we don't realize until they've happened. And then it's like, wait, where are we right now? So we've done a great deal of very unglamorous, unromantic work. Individually in therapy, together outside of our therapist's office. But I want everyone listening to walk away with the idea and the belief that you don't have to trade the spark for safety. When the early fear finally goes quiet, you're not at the end of the relationship. You're standing at the very beginning of the part where you get to stay. This is what the relationship is going to look like. And if you still want to, then wonderful, beautiful. So if anything in this conversation landed for you, if you believe something different, if you have stories of this happening, these things happening to you, share them. If you have examples of what you and your partner do in that space where desire lives, that you want to share in the comments, please do, or DM me. I love hearing how people are making this work and how they're keeping the spark. And I hate it when I read. Oh, sorry. I hate it when I read someone say that chemistry is bad and that the spark is bad. I think we can have both. And it will fade, but we can reignite it as often as we want. So this is the work I do at the Loom Life, helping build relationships and a nervous system that can hold both safety and aliveness at the same time with individuals and couples. So you can find me at theloomlife.com if you're interested in working with me. You can keep coming back here and hearing more of what I am sharing. I love having you here. If you're ready to talk through any of these things or you just have some questions, reach out, let me know. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking with you next time.